information.
Well, thank you. And first of all, I have to say thank you to Shirley for inviting me out here, and thanks and congratulations to the whole Marshall County Historical Society for putting this on. Isn't it great? Can we have a round of applause? Well, the first question you're probably asking is, why is some guy from Canada up here talking to you? Well, as she mentioned, my name is Rutkowski, and I'm a science writer. And I specialize in writing about weird stuff. Like UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts and all that wonderful stuff. I have degrees, though, in astronomy and education. And since the 1970s, I've been investigating UFO reports and writing about interesting cases, mostly in Canada, admittedly, but also we sort of venture into North Dakota and Minnesota within a certain range. And I've written about my investigations, what I've learned from people in a number of books and on some of the TV shows you've probably seen. And every year I publish a study of all the UFO sightings that are reported in Canada. Now, just to give you an idea, in Canada alone, there's about 1,000 UFO reports that are filed every year. In Canada alone. And we know that there's about 10 times as many in the United States. So 10,000 UFO reports in the United States in 1 year. That's a lot of reports. And I mean, I can ask the obvious question: show of hands, who believes in UFOs? Well, of course you're here.
We all know because the Area 51 is actually real aliens.
Area 51. Storming that place like you would.
You're actually right.
But here's the thing. We know we've done some studies, we've done a number of polls nationally, and we know that about 10% of all North Americans believe they've seen a UFO. Hands up who think they've seen a UFO. You're in good company. 10%, 1 in 10 people. And you know, you can go to a party or hang out at a bar or a family picnic, and the conversation will come up. Have you know, I didn't see something, but, you know, Uncle so-and-so, you know, that one. We're fairly certain that he saw something. And then you go around, and people have been reporting these things. We go back literally hundreds and hundreds of years in North America, both in Canada and the United States. The oldest one that I know of in Canada goes back to 1792, and in the United States back to the 1600s. Things that people have seen in the sky. Now, I first heard about Val's experience, like most of you, from what was broadcast on TV and on the radio. I heard about it, probably on the Wednesday, maybe. And I called the station, and I was told, as far as they knew, it had already been investigated by the Center for UFO Studies. That's Alan Henry, who was just mentioned. He's acted so wonderfully. And since it's pretty close, I thought, well, maybe we'll take a look into this one. It seemed to have all those elements that made a good case. You know, and I can't, it was mentioned very briefly, but I can't emphasize this enough. This particular UFO case ticks all the boxes. It happened to a police officer. It was investigated by police right away. We have evidence that something happened. We don't know what it was, but we have evidence that something happened. Something happened to the witness. You know, he was taken to the hospital, checked out, and we have some mysteries about what's going on, and we can find the place. We know exactly where it is, where it happened, and the witness himself, although he's reluctant, he actually did talk to many, many people. You know, That's Incredible, and a few other shows. So we have all the elements of a fantastic case. Now, even though it was fairly close, I was going down, planning on coming down here from Winnipeg. An associate of mine, the group that I was representing at the time was called Ufology Research. His name was Guy Westcott. He was down here with his family, and said to his wife, you know, I'm going to leave you kids camping, even the kids camping, while I go off for a little while. And I don't know if that contributed to their divorce, but he did a really good job. In fact, a lot of the material you see, a lot of the photos that you'll eventually see, were taken by him. It was he who took the recording. I think there's a copy here of the transcript. I came down a little bit later, and we looked at the evidence. We looked at everything from the tire tracks to the car. We did our own measurements. We talked with everybody involved, and then in 1980, in April, we held a UFO conference up in Winnipeg, and we invited Val to come up, and he came up with Greg Rutkowski and Everett Doolittle, and they answered questions and sat down and talked with us up at the University of Manitoba. We had physicists, we had biologists, we had some of the best minds that I could have brought together. And we were just talking with them, and we had a great conversation. And I actually put on YouTube recently an audio recording of part of that. And I actually brought a copy of the audio recording, and we're donating it to the Marshall County Historical Society here, along with a lot of our original investigation files and photos and things. So the display's going to get better. I know it's going to be fantastic. Now, it was the consensus of everyone at the 1980 UFO conference that the damage to the police car was not consistent with it being hit by an object of any kind, including ball lightning. Now, we like ball lightning. I don't know. I actually have seen ball lightning myself. It's very, very rare. Just out of curiosity, has anyone else in this room seen ball lightning? I see a gentleman over here.
My mother.
Your mother?
Talked about it coming and rolling across the back of the chairs that they were having supper, I believe, and then went down in a crack in the floor.
She was saying that the ball lightning rolled around the chairs and then fell into a crack in the floor. That's typically what it does. The one I saw was actually rolling along a telephone line. And what about yours? Is yours like that too? Rolling along the ground. Well, this doesn't sound like what happened to Val. And there's actually physical damage. I mean, the light, maybe blown out, but the cracks, the other stuff, I don't know. So I'm not sure what it was. But the injuries to Val were very puzzling, as was in fact he was knocked out for 39 minutes of the 14-minute discrepancy of the clocks and the wristwatch. And what's interesting, it wasn't a case in isolation. There were other UFO reports in and around Marshall County about the same time, and some that sound really, really familiar. As a matter of fact, Alan Henry himself pointed out that near Vermilion, South Dakota, which is like 400 miles from here, a man driving at 2 o'clock in the morning a couple of days later saw, again, just something right above the road suddenly accelerate towards him and engulf the car in bright light, and he didn't know what that was. And then since then, and our Move On guys have probably mentioned something like this, on October 29th, 1979, so a few months later, a military policeman was driving east on Highway 1 in Marshall County when he too saw a light. He didn't report this, unfortunately, until many, many years later, so we can't really follow it up too well. But he saw a bright light that seemed to play cat and mouse with him, and he drove towards it and it kept proceeding, and it kind of came back and forth. It was a very, very strange case. Now, there's other reports that I've done a lot. I have a huge file on cases all around the world. Here's one that I think is so similar to Val's, I have to think it has to be something similar. It happened earlier. This was 1965. So, 14 years later, not too bad. On December 20th near Herman, Minnesota. Anyone know where Herman is? It's like Bemidji, up that way, right? Somewhere up that way. It's further south than eastern here. Central Minnesota. Central Minnesota? He's been to Bemidji. He's going to Bemidji first and then Area 51. So we get that pickup truck noticed a peculiar object hovering 6 feet above the road, several dozen feet from him. The engine on his car died, and this UFO began to glow red, rose upwards, and shot sparks from it. Next thing that happened, he doesn't remember because he was rendered unconscious. And when he woke up, found himself in the ditch, the pickup, which was traveling west, was now pointed east, and there were no tracks leading into the ditch. So, Minnesota's pretty weird. I don't know why they're right there.
Well, you live in Canada.
But yeah, I could cite a lot of cases. I know my MUFON colleagues are probably going to be doing stuff like that, telling you about the cases. What I will say is that, my background's in astronomy, so yeah, I got to study about the possibility of aliens being out there. And I share the belief, along with most of my astronomy colleagues, that there probably is life out there somewhere. This doesn't prove it. What we can say is we don't know what this was. And we think it's a possibility that given enough circumstances and the right conditions, that there might be aliens traveling between the stars. We have no idea how to do that. Somebody was mentioning quantum physics and things like that. Yeah, I've taken those courses. We don't have anything like that. It's all, you might as well say that pixies did it, which would work for me. But the thing is, it's possible that they could be traveling between the stars. We don't know how to do it. But our sun is pretty average. And there's some stars in our galaxy that are a little bit older. There's some that are a little bit younger. And let's say that there's a star a little bit older than our sun, not too far away. And let's say it has a planet around it. And let's say it develops life. And let's say it develops life to the point where there's people meeting in old warehouses and museums, listening to people talk about it, and life beyond that. Well, let's just say that that planet isn't just 100 years older than this planet that we live on. Let's say that the star is 1,000 years older. It has a 1,000-year head start. You know what? Most stars are a lot older than that. Not just 1,000 years, but 10,000 years, 100,000 years. This thing here, it takes photos, it takes videos. You can actually use it to talk to people. I don't know if you do that. But 100 years ago, you didn't talk to people in anything like this. It was a lot more complicated and a lot less sophisticated. Can you imagine what this is going to look like in 100 years? How are you going to call and talk to people? How are you going to take videos and photos? It's not going to look anything like this. So that's 100 years. 10,000 years? 100,000 years? What is something like this, rather than 40 years old? What will this look like in 40 years from now? What are you going to be driving around on? How are you going to be driving around? You're traveling around this world in 100 years, 200 years, 100,000 years if we're still here.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's possible. There's all things that are possible. So it's a great opportunity to enrich your mind. This is a fantastic artifact. And, go home and think about the possible. People are saying, I don't believe any of that sort of stuff. He's crazy, he made it up. And I said, yeah, you know what? You didn't make up these. You didn't make up the injuries. You just heard from the dispatcher who said this guy doesn't make up stuff like that. He's a pretty solid guy. We know all about it. This actually happened. Whether it was aliens or not, I couldn't tell you. But it's something really, really strange. And as a scientist, I think science has to take another good look at the subject of UFOs. That's where I started. Thank you.